So the process server showed up to my office Friday morning, prepared to drive to Okemos, and started calling the attorney at about 8:30 in the morning from our office, and was not able to get a hold of him until I believe he finally called back about 11, between 11 and 12 that morning, and quickly indicated to the process server that he wasn't trying to avoid service. And no one asked. He was trying to avoid service. So we thought that was kind of weird. But then he did go on to say that he wouldn't be in his office that day. So he couldn't accept service that day. He could meet on Saturday, but we weren't going to send our process server out on a Saturday. It did not get served that Friday. On Saturday, we went out on our own to attempt to serve. I took a third party with me because according to the law, I cannot serve the documents because I'm a party to the case. So I took another individual with me that was over the age of 18 and was eligible for to make service. And we went out to the Addison address and no one was there. We hung out in the Addison area for a few hours and went back by again and no one was there. We drove out to the Grass Lake address and we did not come across her out there that day either. And so we returned back to Adrian. The next day on Sunday, we tried again, and I took someone with me that day as well, but we went much later in the evening because we were thinking that, it's Sunday night and most people are going home, kind of getting settled in after dark because they've got work on Monday morning. So we thought we would try a different time of day. And so we went late Sunday night and still no luck. No one was at the Addison address. And so we chose not to make the trip out to Grass Lake that day. And instead, we said, well, we'll serve her tomorrow because we know where you work at. And we've tried to, work with the attorney and do what you've asked, even though it was kind of a big ask for it to be served 71 miles away. But we tried that, didn't work. So we'll serve her. And she's coming and going from work.
When we first came into town, we went over to Devil's Lake to the home to see if there was any activity. There was cobwebs around the door and no sign of life. So once Jimmy and Anthony went their way, Tamaris and I went to the courthouse and found a parking spot where we could view the employee parking lot. We knew we couldn't do it on the premises, but we were trying to see when she was going to be showing up for court. And from my understanding, she's phenomenal for never being on time for her own courts. And it can be very frustrating for people that have a life and we can get in trouble for something, but she's not getting in trouble for it. So make that make sense. Finally, about 5 minutes before 10, her floor office windows open or lights turned on. And so we're like, oh, okay, so she should be showing up soon. Never showed up. I'm sitting there in the driver's seat with the phone waiting to take a video of everything. And about 10:19 a.m., lo and behold, Judge Salas shows up. Everyone inside waiting on her. Nonchalantly walks in. So then we are like, all right, that's not going to work. So then Tamaris and I met up with Jimmy and Anthony elsewhere, and we came up with a plan of what else we could try to do. So then we waited around. Tamaris went and did what she had to do. And so Anthony, Jimmy, and I then drove around in the van waiting for lunchtime. Waited and waited. She never emerged. So we're like, okay, different plan. So then we went to Tamaris's law office and sat there and had a plan. And while we were there, she got an email from Judge Salas' attorney stating that if we wanted to serve him with the papers, we could. So we knew that Tamaris was going to email him them, but we wanted to make sure he physically had a copy of them in his hands, that he couldn't say that he didn't get it through email or something. So we commenced to go over to the attorney's office. finally found the location, and I grabbed everything, had everything in order, walked in, introduced myself, said I was representing Tamaris Hennigan, and that we had permission to serve you for these papers.
You served all this on it, and I've got it. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what this is. This is, and I'm not going to look at this right now.
Right.
So I don't know what I'm. See attached proof of service addendum. Yeah, I got this. Hell, you can even take a picture of what you sent me. I don't care. I don't care. But I can't. What if I said what's this? What's this? See attached proof of service. What the hell does that mean?
That's this part right here.
So in a complaint and list of documents included in the personal. Okay. Summons, complaint, for it, including exhibits. See, I don't know if all the exhibits are here. So copy. You're just going to have to sign that you gave this to me. Okay.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? I don't mean to be difficult, but I'm not going to go through this right now.
Okay.
And see, but you gave it to me.
Yep.
And you can say this is what I gave him, and
Correct.
I'll look at it at some point.
All right.
And that way I'm not a. I just don't have time to look at that right now.
Okay.
So anyway.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
He was denying signing something that he said that he already got through an email, but he doesn't have time to go through all this. So I accepted his refusal and told him to have a great day, and I left. And we then met with Tamaris again, gave her the paperwork, and we have been having a great journey since then.
This was all going on a Monday or Tuesday that we were attempting to do personal service, but we had attempted to serve her starting from Thursday of the previous week. So the initial process server contacted her by phone that Thursday and asked if they could drop it off to her, at which time she requested that it be taken to her personal attorney in Okemos. So the next morning at 8:30, a Friday morning, that process server was here in my office with me, and they spent from 8:30 to 11:30 trying to get a hold of that attorney, calling and sending emails. And because they didn't want to make a drive to Okemos for nothing. Eventually, sometime between 11:30 and noon, that attorney called back and notified the process server that he would not be in his office that day. She could come out on Saturday if she wanted to. She was not available to do weekend service. So then we made multiple other attempts, both Friday and Saturday at both homes, and we're still unable to locate her. So that was when I reached out to you guys to come in and do it. So again, on Monday, it was later in the morning before we heard from her attorney via email, who then said, I'm in my office today. How about you just email me the documents and you can mail me out a hard copy? Well, you can't do that with people that you can't trust, because that would not be proper service. And they would have been able to argue that they did not agree to service by email, and therefore they would not have had to appear for the hearing. So instead, I did upload the documents so that you could have the convenience of having them in electronic format, but I didn't actually email them until you guys were not far out from the office, so that I knew that you could still get personal service and we couldn't have any discrepancies. It was my expectation that he was going to sign for service, because he had been telling us since Friday that he would accept service. And what was really strange is that he kept mentioning to the process server that they weren't trying to avoid service. I'm not trying to avoid service. Every time she would talk to him, he would say, I'm not trying to avoid service. No one asked him that, and here it was the first day that we were trying to make service, so why in the world would that be coming up is beyond me. Because even normally, if I contact another attorney and said, can I serve something to you on behalf of your client, and it's Friday, and they say, I'll take it on Monday, that's not usually a big deal. So to say, hey, I'm not in my office today, there was no reason for us to think right off the top of our head that they're trying to avoid service. It was kind of an odd
statement to repeat over and over, so. And then, like you said, we waited outside the courthouse, we weren't able to serve her there, so you guys went ahead and drove out to Oakmos, and then, I'll let Shannon pick up from there, because it's all her.
Yeah, once we got there, I got everything situated in order, went inside, introduced myself as a representative for Tamaris Hennigan, and that I was here to serve the documents that he had received by email as well. And I handed him the paperwork, he accepted it, but then he was refusing to sign for the proof of service, because he's like, there's too many documents, too many exhibits that I don't have time to sit here while you stand here. And so once he started saying that, I then started recording the situation so that there was proof that he refused to sign for that, even though he got it through an email that he could have looked at a lot of that stuff before we showed up.
Right. Well, and that itself is unusual in the legal field. It's unusual. We don't. If someone drops something off to our office, like, and Michelle's sitting at her desk, and they say, "This is for Tamaris. We're serving, for her client. Can you sign for it?" Yeah, we do. We
Yeah.
don't flip through every single page of it
Right.
first to see. We go through it later, and if something's missing that's on the proof of service, we would reach out and contact them and say, "Hey, you're missing Exhibit C or
Right.
something. Can you shoot that over?" But I don't know that I've ever before experienced in practice of law where someone made such a huff and puff about,
Yep.
I need to go through every single one of these, and I don't know what's here, and I'm not gonna sign for this because I don't know what's here.
Right.
So it was just odd too.
In the past, when I've served, I really didn't have that issue. I mean, you get some of those belligerent ones that do want to, just because they have an attitude and try to prove a point. But typically, they're just gonna sign because you've already caught them.
Let's talk about the dogs, guys, because there's 3 of 5 of us here, right, that are dash hound parents. Okay. And dash hounds are some of the most psychotic dogs when it comes to being with their owner all the time. When I do leave my dog at home, she sits in the window the entire day, even though there's other humans in the house. She sits in the window to wait for me because she's not for it. But also, if a leaf blows through the yard, she starts barking like a nut. This is just what they do. And they have very distinct barks. And so people who are dash hound owners, when you hear another dash hound barking, you know that it is. I've had people come into our office, hear my dog from another room, and say, "There's a dash hound here somewhere." You just know. And so she owns 2 dash hounds and actually provided pictures of them in the response and an affidavit from the neighbor who says that he goes over there to take the dogs out all the time. I want to say that he said every day, but I'm just going to go with all the time. It was a very, very often. And of all the people who've gone to this house to observe, no one's ever seen a dog.
Not one bark.
Not one. Okay, that's what I was gonna say. Not one bark when you pull up. I don't care if you drive past the house and turn around and come back. No bark. No bark
dog
when.
toys outside.
No dog toys. Yeah. No
First
poop
thing-
piles. Exactly. And no one was barking at you when you went to do service.
And that's the other thing, is
Yeah.
the one thing I looked at on the ground when I was walking up with the grass along the side is you're always going to see a piddle spot somewhere on the lawn. You cannot
You
escape
can tell the
them.
yellow spot, just
Yeah,
to be
the piddle
specific
spot.
of what the
And-
piddle spot
and
is.
it doesn't
if you're
matter
not
if
a
it's
dog
a
owner.
female or male, they'll do the same thing
Yeah.
with the corners, they'll do them on property marks and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I can see, I mean, I can't really hold down, I know she pays this exuberant amount with all these invoices from now into the future, that she supplied, or blanks or whatever that was, that she sent in the stuff back. It doesn't matter how good of a lawn service you have,
It
you are
doesn't
not
matter.
gonna get rid of that.
Right.
I have
You
lawn
have to-
service and I've got piddle spots.
Yeah, you gotta water the heck out of it, you gotta like drown out that spot, try to even get any grass to come back.
Unless you're also paying for grass paint.
Right, grass paint.
Who does that?
Right. Or you have a special turf spot for the dog
Right.
that won't discolor.
Right.
And
And while our trail cam video was not as great as we wanted it to be, you can see movement of vehicles and so on and so forth. And nowhere in there have you guys seen a wheelchair going back and forth from one house to
No.
another and dogs running out of the house. But yet we have this affidavit that says that this gentleman who's in a wheelchair actually goes over every day and lets the dogs out. He doesn't feed the dogs because she does that herself when she comes home. Yet, we don't see him in his wheelchair. We don't see the dog running around, and we don't see either of her vehicles coming in and out in the evening at a time when the dogs would be fed.
Right.
So it's not adding up.
So now, now that we've gotten all this done, what's going on next? What's happening with this case now that the evidence is all put together and moving forward?
So we had a second hearing, and we're still waiting on a written opinion from the judge. The hearing was twofold. It was partially my motion for special leave to file what we call the quo warranto, to ask that she be removed from the bench because she's not a qualified elector in our county. That type of motion requires a judge to grant you permission to file it. So we're waiting for the judge to say yes or no as to whether or not she feels I met the legal requirements to make the filing. Also on that day, there was the defendant's motion to seal the record because she wanted all of this information to not be available to the public, because flat out what they said was that I would probably put it on my Know Who's Judging You website, and they're damn skippy, I will. So but I will not do that without having a ruling from the judge, because I abide by court rules, and that's it. So since she filed that motion, I have withheld from uploading those documents and making them available to the public. During that hearing, though, the judge did state that the records were public records, the documents were public record, and they could be obtained by anyone. There were a couple of things in those public records that maybe make people uncomfortable, but doesn't necessarily mean it's not public. And so, while the judge indicated that, you know, it was likely that the record couldn't be sealed, maybe we could discuss redaction, I wanted to be cooperative. You know, there's not, all of this is public record, so anyone can go pull it. It does not harm my case if I say I'll redact some of this information out to make it a little bit harder for someone to find. Let them go fish it out themselves if they want it. So I volunteered to redact, I believe it was, if there was any place that had her date of birth, social security number, which a lot of this was already redacted, just not fully redacted. So it would be maybe a couple of numbers of the social security, but everything else had stars and so on. We also agreed to redact VIN numbers and license plate numbers affiliated with cars that she drives. That was mostly because she doesn't own those cars, and so more so as a courtesy to the people who do own the cars. No point in having that there. The judge can see it on her copy. It doesn't need to be a public record. And and her personal cell phone number. The judge was very concerned about the personal cell phone number of another judge being public. If you're from here, you know that most of us attorneys here, we give out our personal cell phone numbers, and this is the same number that she had while she was practicing. I'd say she's probably had it a minimum of 10 years, but it's a number that's well known, and if you just Google it, it pops up. However, I can understand how another judge might feel that way, and so I did offer to redact the personal cell phone number as well. Ultimately, though, once I sat down with investigative reports, I made a choice to voluntarily redact some other things as well. So I just sent that over to her attorneys, because we heard from the judge a couple days ago asking for a stipulation in order, which is basically an agreement between both sides about what will be redacted, meaning that once we sign that, the judge will not even have to rule on that motion because the parties have come to an agreement. So then we're just waiting on her to rule on my motion. So I sent the documents over to one of her attorneys that I had redacted, and then I included a list of what I redacted. And I highlighted what I had previously agreed, which was 4 different items. But I believe the list included 12 items by the time I sent it over. And what I chose to do was to redact the Jackson County address, because if we are in fact able to show that she does not live where she claims that she lives in Lenawee County, there's no need for people to be harassing her in Jackson County. You know, let her live her life. That's where she lives. That's where she lives. So I did redact that, including the city and zip. I did redact her husband's name from anywhere within those documents so that people who are not personally affiliated with her do not have to have her husband's name out there. I also redacted identifying information for her husband, all VINs and license plate numbers of cars that he's owned, because there was a long list of those. And I think that was mostly it, but it was just kind of broken down into every single thing. And then I indicated to the other attorney that that was a gesture of good faith on my part, because while it seems to have been forgotten from their side that prior to this lawsuit being filed and prior to any challenges to the ballot, that there were people on their team on my husband's Facebook page, and they were taking all kinds of snapshots and information about his career and dates that he had coming up and so on and so forth. And all of that was submitted with their challenge. But they didn't seem to think that was stalkerish in any way, shape, or form. And for me, my husband has some very delicate medical things going on. And so had he gotten really wound up about that, it really could have been harmful to his health. And so looking at that from the perspective of a wife, no matter what my career is, her husband didn't sign up to run for election. I'm not gonna say he didn't sign up for this, because he damn well knows where she lives, but he didn't sign up to run for election. So as a gesture of good faith and courtesy, I took the steps to remove his identifying information from those documents. As long as we're redacting, then let's just, do that as well. So we are waiting for the stipulation in order to come back from her attorney and see if it's something that we can all agree on. If it is, then we'll both sides will sign that, and then we send it to the judge for signature. It becomes an order of the court.
All right.
And it's not a situation where the judge ruled on the favor of one side or the other.
Right.
But where the judge made a suggestion and we said, all right, we'll give that a try. And now we're trying to put together an agreement to follow that suggestion. So it's not a win for either side. It's just a compromise, I guess. And then in addition to that, we are now still waiting for the actual ruling on my motion, which will tell us yes or no whether or not I have permission to go forward and file the actual lawsuit. So we'll see when that comes.
Right.
That's where we're at now.
Time will tell.
See you next season.
Don't be shy, don't deny, you ought to be fine, fine. Don't be shy, don't deny, you ought to